So our first speaker today is Mayor Thomas Sierzycki. Welcome, Thomas.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I start the presentation, I just want to say a thank you to everyone in this room who sent apparatus, who sent best wishes, and all the good things that came out of the wildfires. As we know, communities across the north were impacted by the fires, from communities like Pine House, Montreal Lake. This is my account on what happened in Ronge. However, we were all touched in the north, and thank you very much for your support. So a little bit about myself. Fancy introduction. I promised I would pay Bruce, so thank you for that. But in terms of being a person, I always want to highlight my family and, of course, my little son. He's 15 weeks, so I thought I'd put a picture on there. Born and raised in Ronge, my mom and dad came from Poland, so the north has always been my home. So a little bit in terms of the preparedness. I'm getting heckled already from the front here. After the Mallard Fire of '99, the town of Ronge put into place a comprehensive EMO plan, which was also with a coordinator in place. So this plan was reviewed annually to some degree. Ronge has a complement of 32 firefighters, including 2 full-time fire chiefs. As you can see, 3 engines, 2 command vehicles. If something's happening in the Ronge region, mutual aid is over 2 hours away, and hence why we have a good complement of apparatus for that. We have 25 paramedics with Ronge EMS, 32 member RCMP, 10 conservation officers, and a 13 physician hospital. So we have adequate services for our region that do tremendous work, and because of them, the situation was a little bit alleviated in severity. So the start of the fire season 2015. We expected that it would be a busy fire season, however, no one expected it to this degree. A dry lightning storm moved through the region on June 6th. It resulted in numerous fires starting. Of course, the wind and conditions were perfectly right for fires. One of 2 precautionary evacuations took place that month, one for the week during June 6th ignitions, and one for the week of July 4th, which included the mandatory evacuation for the Ronge region. So just a few little pictures there in terms of the June 6th lightning storm. As it came over, in the peak of the afternoon, it was so dark that we had lights turned on inside our home, as well as the band. We were all situated at the Lac La Ronge Indian Band talking about what needed to be done in the region, and it was so dark it seemed like it was nighttime outside. Never in my life had I witnessed that amount of smoke in the air. On June 6th, it began really heating up in terms of over 100 fires burning in northern Saskatchewan. Numerous homes and cabins were lost in the Naniban area. Volunteer evacuation of Ronge, like I said, from June 6th to June 12th, especially those with respiratory distress and people that were pregnant. And women that were pregnant, I don't think people in general are pregnant. Additional resources were dispatched through EMFS. I see Fire Commissioner in the back room. Thank you for attending. And that was really important to gear up in terms of what we needed in the region in case things turned very bad. On June 25th, as fire approached more communities, they became threatened by wildfire and homes and cabins burnt. And that's a real emotional aspect of a lot of people losing a lot of things that they worked for very hard in the north. So here's some of the ways we communicated. Anytime there's a situation as fires, floods, the province has developed a new system of 911 preparedness. Some of the things that went out include this wildfire message on actually the weather network. It caught us off guard a little bit. We had a lot of residents calling us asking for information because at that time Ronge was still about a week away from evacuation. We spoke with the province, that came forth, but the system is a tremendous asset, so any of the communities in the future will definitely have a good, valuable tool to get communication out to people. On the week of June 27th to July 3rd, it continued to be dry, hot, wind conditions not helping the situation. Smoke prevented our provincial fleet from flying, which was also very difficult. Communities, again, such as Montreal Lake, lost buildings. And Premier Wall and Minister Cox came to Ronge, as well as Cam Broten reached out, as well as other political leaders, to ensure that everything was being done for the residents of northern Saskatchewan. Preparation in the situation itself. Prior to the actual evacuation of Ronge, we met with our staff and managers came in, we pulled out the EMO plan, we listed off who was valuable, who wasn't, in terms of what resources they could provide, and really started gearing up potentially what could happen. We seconded at that time Scott Boyes, who was with the Ministry of Government Relations, to be our communications person, because we felt communications would be a key issue in case we did have to do something and evacuate people in the region. So the ag fire threatens Laronge. Leading up to this, Mayor Stomp and I, Chief Tammy Cook-Searson from Lac La Ronge Indian Band, as well as other individuals, were meeting on a daily basis with wildfire management. We were getting up-to-date information, as up-to-date as they could provide, and offer some insight on what was happening in the region as a whole. Prior to July 4th, we were running into some issues in terms of smoke. Because aircraft couldn't fly, we didn't actually know where the fire was. So for preceding days up to the evacuation, we had a sense of where the fire was actually moving, but it wasn't until that morning that really put it in perspective when satellite imaging showed the fire had crossed the threshold we had set around our community. So strong winds are causing fire losses in Wadden Bay. The night of July 3rd, our fire department responded, as well as at 10 a.m. wildfire management in cooperation with EMFS, RCMP, indicated that the fire was 8 kilometers outside of the town of Ronge municipal boundaries. So the evacuation itself, as a region, we had met at the fire hall, which was actually selected as the regional EMO center at that time prior to moving operations to the village of Ronge and their council chambers, because the fire hall was actually within the hot zone of fire approaching. We met with officials and decided that evacuation should take place. We wanted to benefit from the daylight so that people could evacuate in a safe manner and to ensure the most safety of residents. As you know, fire continued to burn everywhere in the north, and at times highway access was very much so restricted. A message went out via social media as well as the radio and any other sources of information passing on that we could. Unfortunately, at the time the evacuation was called, there was a semi-rollover on the main highway leading outside of La Ronge and Lac La Ronge Indian Band. Our fire department responded very quickly, as well as a helicopter, to try to minute the damage, but it just shows that in disaster, anything that can happen, chances are will happen. And we didn't prepare for that. Who would have thought the main highway leading out would have that? But unfortunately, it did happen, but people were safe, and no one actually got injured severely. So the fire situation towards the afternoon on July 4th, the red indicates fire growth and fire progression. This is municipal airport right here. This is the town of La Ronge. Lac La Ronge Indian Band is here, and the village of Ronge is about here. So towards the day, progression quickly happened over that 8-kilometer spread. Fire department got a call around 3:30 indicating that there was fire at the airport, and their services were required to prevent damage from the airport. To keep in contrast, La Ronge Municipal Airport is the third busiest airport in the province with the provincial fleet. So because they couldn't fly, there was a lot of planes grounded actually at the airport, and it was important to prevent any damage from the fleet happening as well. Towards the next few days, fire continued to grow. We had 2 flanks of fire that we were concerned about. This flank here, which the mallard fire had burnt out this area, so there was some protection to the community. As you can see, the village of Ronge is here, so we're worried about growth into there, and Gord can touch base on that, as well as this flank of the fire, which was threatening Eagle Point, which actually in 99 sustained substantive damage, as well as the town of La Ronge moving forward. So in terms of the historical evacuation, it was part of the largest evacuation in Saskatchewan history. Never do you go into it thinking that you're going to create history. Never do you actually think about the history that you're creating. But it was a huge undertaking by many dedicated people, whether it was the Red Cross, whether it was the province, whether it was the First Nation doing the evacuation center itself. Tremendous people came forward for really preventing further damage. Over 60 fire departments from across the province signed up to be deployed in La Ronge if needed, which showed the strength of this province and the resiliency of people. Many volunteers fought fire outside the municipal boundaries in the region, and they are the ones that saved countless properties in those areas. Simply, there wasn't enough sprinkler systems or other assets to go around, and these volunteers really made the difference. And finally, EOC was established with regular meetings, services including food, security, animal welfare, and essential services in the community. So a couple pictures, a morning debrief with Fire Chief Ron Pratt from regional fire departments, all situated in the fire hall, various apparatus. And this is a shot taken by a Transwest pilot kind of flying over the La Ronge area. As you can see, various plumes of smoke around the community itself, just to put in perspective how close it was. Throughout the ordeal, lots of organizations stepped forward. And anytime you are doing emergency planning, it's very important to consider not only your municipal services, but also the services that supply additional services within your municipality. SAS Power did a tremendous job. I know Pine House was without power for about 6 days. La Ronge was lucky in terms of the power stayed on. Lauren Prodale and his crew did a tremendous job. A bunch of guys came up to Ronge and actually donated a flag to our EOC center, and it was just a show of solidarity with everyone involved. Here's a picture from our just downtown. You can see fire plumes and a City of Prince Albert pumper truck sitting at the co-op having a refreshment. So thank you very much, City of Prince Albert. EOC was established in Village Air Ronge Council. Tremendous support throughout. In the picture, you have Chief Tammy as well as EOC coordinators. Everyone that needed to play a vital role was included in those meetings, and again, did tremendous jobs. Chopperzilla, the largest helicopter in North America, provided tremendous support to the men and women on the front lines, and it was amazing to see that bad boy fly, and it was pretty relief once it was flying for the support it did. A couple pictures here in terms of the right and left hand corners is just fire in one bay. I included these pictures to show the severity of fire. This was taken at about 4:30 in the morning. Usually fire has a down period where it lies down a little bit, humidity increases. This fire just continued to grow. So it shows how active it was in the middle of the night, and it was something that crews from wildfire management had never seen in their careers. Down below, we have apparatus again from City Prince Albert, Muscadet First Nation, and the town of Nipawin. So the fire aftermath. Over 100 buildings were destroyed. There was no damage to the town of La Ronge. Businesses closed for 2 weeks in La Ronge, and many seasonal businesses were also affected. Many seasonal fishing camps, tourism industry, significantly impacted. They're still seeing the effects of that. We're hoping with the lower Canadian dollar, not good for every aspect of the economy, but for us, hopefully getting that American tourism influx to rebuild some of the tourism aspects. Disruption and home insurance issues. Many people thought they were insured for fire, but it's not actually insured for the time away from business, which was a hardship on our local business. Emotional responses from residents. There was good, there was bad, and there's ugly. The emotions of a situation is that and being away from your home and your family for 2 weeks, a tremendous hardship. And that looking forward to future incidents is something that we need to consider. Jurisdictional challenges and personalities. When you're looking at each other for 2 weeks, in the midst of some difficult decisions and difficult times, sometimes personalities and things play into force. It doesn't take away from the great work that everyone did. However, it's another consideration as you go forward. And no major injuries or lives lost. Here's an example of a sprinkler unit that was actually set up on this camper. I was told that the camper itself is intact, but you can see the boat, aluminum boat, clearly melted by the fire that went around the campsite. Great support in terms of hampers handed out to communities for individuals that needed the additional assistance once they came back to the community, and an aerial shot that Mayor Stomp and I went up in terms of the fire burning on the flankage of the airport here, 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 and the community right here. So if the wind did shift that day or blew a little bit harder as they were projecting, it could have been very different. So moving forward, what does this mean for the community as a whole? And of course, as the region as a whole, because we are very much so integrated with all our partners, and if it affects one partner, it affects all the partners. Review process underway internally and public from all levels of government. As a municipality, we've done a municipal review in terms of what processes the municipality did and what needs to change. We're updating our EMO plan where needed. There's certain things that you don't think of. For example, because it was an evacuation of 2 weeks, Councillor Hordiski and his great team at Northern Animal Rescue did tremendous work to continue allowing animals to have a good quality life when their owners were displaced from the community. Those aren't things you really think of in an EMO plan, but for a duration of 2 weeks, it's something that does come up. And review of wildfire management processes. Of course, there's some instances where people have felt there should have been a different response. You deal with the situation that's current, but because we have the ability to look back, there's some hard questions that were asked, that need to be asked, and we're looking forward to what the province has in terms of changes to their actual firefighting structure. And finally, legislation on who stays and who is evacuated. Anytime you evacuate from a region of about 8,000 people, you have people that want to come home. And to tell someone that they can't come home, you definitely get some emotional aspects from that. So another aerial shot here of how close fire came to many cabins in the area, fire going across, and just a downtown shot. Right in the distance here is burnt, and this is just a vantage point from looking into the town of La Ronge. So I look forward to your questions. Thank you for taking the opportunity. And definitely, again, a thank you to everyone that reached out to our communities in times of crisis. And it's definitely a great learning curve. We were talking with Pine House. Unfortunately, these disasters happen in cyclical nature of 20 to 25 years. Leadership often changes in that time scope, so it's important for us to continue implementing EMO plans, upgrades to those plans, so that the next generation of leadership understands what we went through, but also can implement their changes as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Our next presenter is Mayor Gordon Stomp, Village of Ronge. Welcome, Gordon.
Yeah, and I'm from the other generation, so you're not going to see much on that screen today. I would say Thomas did an excellent job. We can never overstress the fact that we are a regional community. We have the Lac Ronge Indian Band, the town of Ronge and Ronge squeezed right in the middle there somewhere, and we're very dependent on each other as we move forward. And those are our neighbors, and we look out for them as well as anyone else. Also, I'd like to thank all the volunteer fire departments that made themselves available to come. It is a regional fire department that we have in La Ronge, for the band, the village, and the town. And we certainly appreciate all the support people that came in as well. I'm not going to give you very much more than you've heard, that's for sure, and it's a short summary. The 2015 fire season began early with no fall precipitation, very little snow last winter, and almost no precipitation from early spring to mid-July. The stage was set for what would be an unprecedented threatening fire season. By June 5th, there were fires burning from La Loche to Pine House, further west of the Egg Fire area. During the first week of June, electrical storms started 5 or 6 fires west and north of our tri-community area. By July 4th, these fires were threatening the municipal airport, Eagle Point, and Ronge, just north of our little northern village of Ronge. And by the 5th of July, the fire was also threatening the Lac Ronge Band community of Big Stone and the village of Ronge. Decision was then made to declare a mandatory evacuation for Ronge residents and the Lac Ronge Band members, and the town went the previous day. At this time, the Regional Emergency Operations Center, the town of La Ronge, the community administration staff, the village of Ronge members were all working out of the village office. Evacuations were recorded and administered out of the Lac Ronge Indian Band's JR Center by both the band and the Red Cross members. The importance of the Lac Ronge Band helping with evacuation, security, food preparation, and distribution cannot be stressed enough, and we are very appreciative of them for helping our regional community to the extent that they did. Emergency measures and fire suppression were extremely helpful and supportive during the time frame. They provided personnel, equipment, and expert advice. Wildfires burned in all directions around our community. There were many structures lost. Large areas of boreal forest burnt, and having just one main highway 2 south and 102 north in and out of our region meant road access was threatened many times. The Egg Fire grew to well over 100,000 hectares, and by the end, it was 125,000 hectares. Just to give you an idea of the area that we're talking about, the Carey Fire burnt over 200 hectares just east of Lac La Ronge Lake. The Francis Fire burnt 2,800 hectares just north of the La Ronge area. All of these fires were huge concerns for the region and the Lac La Ronge Provincial Park. So you can imagine all the people that were affected because of our roadblocks and our precautionary measures within our communities. It became clear that fire management was very challenged, unprepared, and unsuccessful in controlling the fire as well as was expected. Their water bomber and Convair planes were not utilized to their full extent to help control the fires. Much help was reached out for and was acquired to assist wildfire management. Because of our own excellent staff and help from Northern Municipal Services, as well as other agencies, the village of Ronge provided all the resources, security, and work needed within our community during the duration of the emergency. And, you know, we can never express our special thanks and extended gratitude to all the agencies and the different volunteer people that did help us through these difficult situations. I put down a few lessons learned, and I mean, the village needs to be prepared to protect our more vulnerable areas of our community by having essential personnel identified and expanded to include a plan to maintain sprinkler pumps and access the resources that the village is planning to acquire. The regional EOP must be expanded to include input and representation from Northern Municipal Service and the Lac La Ronge Provincial Park. All essential personnel for the community and businesses should be identified, documented with the regional EOP and updated on a regular basis. PDAP right now covers all flood costs. In the north, it does not cover the wildfires within the boreal forests. We would think that the government should extend the PDAP coverage to include a lot of interface and wildfire problems that we have with wildfires in the boreal forest. I have one other sort of a, I don't know, it's sort of a controversial issue as far as I'm concerned. Residents should not be evacuated because of smoke conditions, except for the chronic and the people who wish to leave at their own discretion. And I think we need to do a lot of work with our emergency planning and identifying essential people and working with this evacuation because of smoke. Evacuation was lifted on July 17th, and because of all of the efforts, but because the good Lord let it rain. And that's what kind of slowed down our fires. And hopefully next spring won't be near as bad as it has been this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Gord. Our next presenter is Sandra MacArthur with the Canadian Red Cross volunteer and CAO of the town of Osler. Welcome, Sandra.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for the town of Osler, but I also am, and more importantly for today, I am a Canadian Red Cross volunteer. The Canadian Red Cross, as you all know, is part of an international organization, and we service as many people who are vulnerable as we possibly can. So we're part of not only the Red Cross, but also the Red Crescent movements. So that's just a little bit of background about how big we are. In Canada, we consider ourselves one Red Cross, and that was really clear this summer when we were working with this particular disaster. And as was mentioned earlier, it's the largest disaster we have ever responded to in Saskatchewan. We had people here from all across Canada helping the Red Cross to assist with respect to the evacuations that we handled. My role was pretty insignificant when you think about that. I was basically a night manager at a shelter in Saskatoon for the extent of the disaster. So that seems to be one of those positions most people don't want. So I would come in at 11 o'clock at night and I'd stay until 7 o'clock in the morning, and that was kind of the least desirable position of all, but it seemed to work well for me because it allowed my council to let me take some time so I wouldn't have to work full days, but I could still go into the office and help out where needed. So just so everyone in this room is aware, there are all kinds of opportunities like that for folks that work in municipal government. And for those of you electeds that are here, it's an awesome thing that my council has done to allow me to do this volunteer work and work closely with the Red Cross and also with the town. So The girls in my office often say to me, when I apologize for being gone at a disaster or for an evacuation or something, they say, someone has to do it. We'd rather you went and did it. We'll look after the office. We can do that. So I'm really pleased and proud of my staff as well. So the Red Cross was called out by the province for this particular disaster, but not everything that the Red Cross does relates to major disasters. We have other things that we do as well. We do more minor disasters, we do house fires, things like that. So we do a broad spectrum of work for the people of our province and our country. It's likely that sometime your community will be affected by a disaster of some sort. Hopefully nothing as big as what happened this past summer, but it might just be something as simple as a house fire, or it might be an apartment fire, could be a flood, could be a tornado, or something of that nature. And it's really important for us all to remember that all of those things need to be tended to, and that's part of what the Red Cross does for you. In Saskatchewan, the Canadian Red Cross is under contract with the province of Saskatchewan to respond, we have an agreement, to respond to provide emergency services like food, clothing, and shelter throughout the province. That is done at the call of the province. They will call someone at the Red Cross office and say, there is an evacuation, we need you. And we will come, we will respond. Before the day is out, I want to leave two really important things with you. One of them is that you will have a disaster at some time in your community, and yes, the Red Cross will be there for you. The next picture I'm going to show you is actually right here. This is a picture of Everest Center this past summer during the evacuations. It took place right here in this building. So what you see there was how it was set up during the evacuation. It might make you think that isn't the place I'd really want to be, and I couldn't agree more. None of us want to have to be in this position, but if we are, I'm thankful that I can be part of an organization that helps to respond to this sort of an emergency. So when a situation occurs in your community and a state of emergency is declared, then the provincial government will step in, and through the provincial agreement that they have with the Red Cross, they will call on us to set up evacuation shelters and to do registration and to assist with people that have been displaced. We will look after basic needs. We'll provide temporary shelter, food, and clothing. It's always provided on a need basis, not a want basis. That's just one of the guidelines of the Red Cross, and we must follow those guidelines. They are Canada-wide. This happened this past summer. We hope it never happens again to this extent, but we will always be here to help with whatever we can. The Red Cross, like any other large organization, has some basic guidelines that we follow. So our first and most important guideline is that we will respond as rapidly as we can. So that's part of what we're learning to do better. Our organization is working on something called a rapid response team, which will then move forward. If the call comes out, we will have a team of people prepared. They'll be on call and they'll be prepared to come and set up in your community if there is a need for us. We also have a policy or a guideline that says we provide needs, not losses. So although you may have lost a lot, what we will make sure is that you have food, you have a place to sleep, and you have clothes on your back. We have a variety of different ways of assessing how much people get when the time comes, but we do have guidelines provided from the Government of Canada, or the Canadian Red Cross, which is auxiliary to the Government of Canada. So we do follow those, and there is no cost to the clients when we provide that. We do encourage self-sufficiency whenever possible, And when you looked at the Everest Center, you will know that preference would be if you could stay with family and friends or someone where else, but we do provide the larger shelters as needed. The next picture is just talking a little bit about the phases of a disaster. There are 4 phases to every disaster, and these 2 gentlemen that spoke before me did a really good job of talking about their preparedness, their EMO, the things that can be done to mitigate. It's always important to plan ahead. Even though you don't want anything to go wrong, if you're prepared, it seems to go so much better. The Red Cross generally works a little bit with preparedness. We try to make sure that everyone is aware what personal preparedness looks like, what a community preparedness might look like, and that sort of thing. We also strongly participate in the relief phase, and we are moving to more work in the recovery as well. In addition to the 4 phases of a disaster, there are actually 5 levels of disaster that have been sort of identified. The first level is a personal disaster, and that would be something similar to a house fire, so a single family, single disaster. Level 2 is a local response, where you might have something that's quite area specific, like possibly an apartment fire or a storm event or a flood event or something of that nature. Level 3 is provincial response, and that would be things like a plow wind or a tornado, and again, flooding, but for a larger area. Level 4 would be a major response, which affects numerous communities around the province, or even possibly moving into the next province. And a level 5 is called a catastrophic response, and that would be something like what happened in Haiti a number of years ago. The event this summer was a level 4, so it was absolutely one of the highest levels of disaster that we have identified in our studies. Thinking about that and thinking about your home community, there's a question I have. So what percentage of prairie residents have experienced, say for instance, a storm-related disaster? The answer is actually 47%. So 47% of residents in Saskatchewan have experienced some sort of storm-related disaster. That is substantially higher than the Canadian average, which is 38%. Prairie residents are the most likely to say they see the need for disaster preparedness, and I'm really proud of our prairie folks for that reason. Sometimes, though, we just haven't quite gotten around to doing the plan, or to dusting it off, or to reviewing it, as mentioned, annually or semi-annually, or meeting regularly to talk about the plan. That's sort of part of my other hat, because I do that municipally as well. So we know how important that is, not only for communities, but for EMOs, for mutual aid areas, and of course, folks like the Red Cross. But it all starts with personal preparedness, and we want to remember that. The Red Cross encourages all families to be prepared with supplies in their own homes for at least 72 hours. In the case of a fire like this, people had to leave. But in the case of some other instances, so for instance, a winter storm or some other place where you have to shelter in place, that's when it becomes important to be prepared for your home and your family for at least those first 72 hours. The Red Cross does encourage you to do that, so I would share with you that there are federal sites that you can go to that talk about the 72 hours of preparedness. There are lots of places where you can go to find the supplies or the list of supplies you need, that sort of thing. So we would really strongly recommend thinking about that as a first step. Think about your personal preparedness before we take the next step into making sure you have municipal preparedness and so on. And then there's community preparedness. And I know that because you are a group of elected officials and administrative staff, that you will know about that and you know how important that is. Every municipality must have an emergency response plan, and it must contain the necessary information to conduct a full response. Canadian Red Cross will fit into your plan, and we will assist you as needed if you have an agreement with us or if you call us. What the Red Cross does most often in situations like this is they do come to you and they do assist you with registration. I have to tell you, one of the most difficult things is to keep track of people in the case of a disaster and make sure that everyone's been looked after, everyone's been accounted for, we know where people are, we know how to let them know when it's safe to go home. Those are really important things. As I said, the Red Cross has a contract with the province of Saskatchewan, and it does have some municipal contracts. They're always open to talking to your municipality about that, what we can do to help you in the case of a local disaster. Maybe put us on your list of people that will help you with registrations and that sort of thing. There are mutual aid agreements. You could possibly build the Red Cross into those. One of the stages that we talked about is the relief stage, and we do look after the smaller personal disasters, and I sometimes think that we locally forget that. So, and partly because we're such good people in Saskatchewan, we're such good friends, we go help our neighbor that's had the fire. The Red Cross will help your neighbor that's had the fire as well. We do look after the first 72 hours. If they don't have somewhere to sleep, we'll make sure they have a bed for 3 nights. If they don't have any clothes, they all went up in a fire, we'll make sure that gets looked after for them. So please do take note of this number, and if anything should happen in your community, please make sure you call us. Share that number with your fire departments, share that number with your EMO, share that number with your town office. We're happy to be there whenever we can to assist. That's our role as volunteers. We don't want to be called, but be sure if there's a need, do call us. I would encourage each municipality here to think about talking to your friends and neighbors about the possibility of having some volunteers trained in your community. You heard in my bio that I'm one of the things I do is I teach disaster management. So one of my courses is just about how to help someone when they've had a house fire, and then they escalate. There's higher level courses after that, but we're always looking for volunteers at the Red Cross that can come out and help in your own community. The more people we have out there in the province that can help, the easier the job will be for everyone. This picture is from Cold Lake, Alberta. So among other places, some of the evacuees did go to Cold Lake, Alberta. This is a large-scale disaster that crossed provincial boundaries. We work with EMOs everywhere, and we also work with other municipalities and Canadian Red Cross branches to make sure that people are looked after. Typically, Red Cross volunteers assist locally, they register evacuees, and then the agreement expands as the need arises. If the disaster is provincially declared, of course, we are there on behalf of the government, and we will provide all social services. That's what we have contracted with the province of Saskatchewan to do. We do all social services. In this picture, you'll notice there's 2 guys there, I think, that have Amcross vests on. So we actually had people up here from the United States of America, Canadian Red Cross volunteers that assisted during our summer evacuation. The next one is pretty statistical, and I'm not sure how much of it you can actually read from where you're sitting, but it talks about the number of people that were helped in all these various locations. So it lists Cold Lake, Alberta, where 798 people were assisted. In North Battleford, we had 320 people assisted. In Prince Albert, 4,706 people were assisted. In Regina, 1,254 people were assisted. And in Saskatoon, we assisted 3,320 people. So it was a really large disaster, the largest ever. And I am so proud of the people that helped in all ways, of our fire departments, of our Red Cross volunteers, of our walk-in volunteers that were there to help do what they could for the people who were displaced. I know that I worked the shelters in Saskatoon, and I met some really amazing people, and I can't remember which one of you gentlemen spoke about the animals, but I can remember working one night, and a woman came up to me, and she was so excited. She said, "I just got a text message. Someone looked after feeding my dog tonight. I'm so pleased." And it was almost like a tear-jerking moment. So that just mattered so much to her. So it shows how important the small things are when things, and how emotional people can get during instances like this. I do have, just in case you're interested and you want your municipality to be in touch with the Canadian Red Cross, I do have an email address up there. Dave Kaiba is our disaster management lead in the province of Saskatchewan, and he would be happy to speak to any of you about something like a municipal agreement or something of that nature. Or if you're just looking to have some people in your community trained as Red Cross volunteers, Dave's the guy to go to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So we're going to open the floor to questions now.
Rick Orr, Councillor for City of Prince Albert. I want to say, first of all, how proud we were of our citizens in Prince Albert for reaching out and helping our northern victims. But I want to say that the work done by the people coming in, they were respectful, they were excited about being welcomed by friends, neighbors, and family. But one of the things that they were telling us all is how worried they were about their possessions and their homes and things like that. So I'd like to hear a little bit about the thoughts of having people stay unless it's medically needed for them to be sent out. And I understand other countries have looked at ways of protecting their communities. I wonder if we're ready to look at that, and I'm not sure if one of the mayors want to talk about that or whatever. One other thing about Prince Albert, we were kind of not the gateway, we were kind of the funnel. We were the funnel out of the north and the funnel back in. And at one period, our Red Cross was set up, our EMO in Prince Albert. I think our community stepped up because of the friendship, the family, and everyone. I know one family had 14 or 13 people living in their house during that period, and that's what we do as Saskatchewan. But one of the things that we learned very quickly was that we also became the place where people came back on their way north, and they spent a day or two. Our hotels, everything were full, and I just want to say how important it was to everybody involved that our whole province got together and supported the evacuees. It's what we do best in Saskatchewan.
Well, I'm the CEO for New North Outlook, and I'd just like to bring the attention to everybody in the room that the mayor and councillors of both the Ronge and Ronge and the Lake Ronge Band councillors did an outstanding job, but my appreciation fully goes out to the Red Cross. I worked in Saskatoon in the centres, and they did an outstanding job. People were so well looked after, it wasn't funny. The only bad part is when they returned back to the communities, the Red Cross fed them and looked after them so well for the 2 weeks or more. When they got home, they had nothing. Their fridges are all spoiled and that. So that's the only thing I like to see is the government look at something when the individuals are returned to their communities, that they're given some support. But I'd like to give great kudos to the Red Cross for doing an outstanding job and helping everybody in northern Saskatchewan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Martin Ring, City Councillor, City of Prince Albert. I think what I've taken away from this, and again, thank you for sharing your stories, of what took place. But, back to Councillor Rick Orr's point as well, I think what we take away from this is the fact that we all have emergency plans, and this emergency didn't in fact directly impact the City of Prince Albert, but it did because we had an influx of over 4,000 people that came into our community that we had to learn how to deal with as well. And I remember first getting elected to council some 9 years ago, and I remember the fire chief taking the new councillors, and I've still got the binder sitting at home, and it's emergency preparedness, and it was kind of one of those wow factors, and we handled it. But I think for all of us here, it's to take a look again at those emergency plans and review them and what can we learn. To the Red Cross point, my day job is Canada Post, and you struck on something very close to home to me, and that was trying to figure out where everybody was. And I know we dealt with it for probably 2 weeks. We had the postmaster, Celine from the Ronge post office was in Prince Albert, along with some of her staff, just sorting the mail and trying to get things figured out. And then we had to figure out who was at Coal Lake, who was in Regina, who's in Saskatoon, and it was a bit of a nightmare. I think it's something that we can certainly improve upon, though. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Greg Ross from the Northern Village of Pine House. I'd like to give a little bit of background before I ask a couple of questions. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me about prior to 2003, Saskatchewan probably had the most efficient, effective, quick response format for firefighting in North America. And our teams were sent all over. And Gord, you'll also remember through that round where we got into the let it burn policy. A lot of the northern leaders got into a lot of discussions on that. I'm not here to take a position on let it burn, not let it burn, that sort of thing. But the one thing is that prior to the let it burn policy, there was a relationship between northern communities and the firefighting teams. And every northern community actually had some pretty good react teams that were part of maybe the best in the world react teams for firefighting. Unfortunately, the let it burn policy kind of allowed that to wander, and it never did come back to play again. I'm wondering, a lot of the challenges for the fires to come as close as they did to the communities, if the relationship between northern communities and their firefighters and that quick response team that the province used to have needs to be considered again. I understand the let it burn policy, but last year, let it burn really burnt. And I'm wondering if a reevaluation of that relationship, and again, any of the leadership around that were part of the decision making prior to the let it burn, we had some really, really well-established response teams in every northern community. So I'm just wondering whether there's any consideration for whether it's the New North group, the SUMA group, is there something that we should be doing to try and encourage our relationship again? I'm not even sure where to be taking it, but it just seems that there's a gap in there somewhere.
Hi, Doreen Polchik, Deputy Mayor Ronge. A couple of things. I just wanted to add something to what Al Loke said about, thank you to the Red Cross, but when people did come home, there were, it wasn't immediate, but there were, in our community alone for Ronge, and we did provide some for Air Ronge until they got moved over there, over 800 hampers of food. So it was like a huge egg carton full of dry goods, and there was, craft dinner and evaporated milk and coffee and just the essentials dry mix. They got a huge sack of flour. They got a huge bale of sugar and potatoes. And that was given to our community by Potash Corp and brought up by NRT. Now I know the Lac La Ronge Indian Band also received it, so it wasn't exactly the day the people came home, but I would just like to say that there was provisions made for these people. And I guess my question is to Gord, is something that you had said, that the wildfire management wasn't prepared. And I just would just like, can you expand on that, what you meant by that? Thank you.
Joe Rodisky, councillor for Town of La Ronge. I was the mayor back in '99 when we had the Mallard fire come through, and our fire chief at the time, he was in his probation period. He says, I got baptized by fire, and we were very fortunate to have him stick around for the number of years so that he was able to provide assistance to this fire that we had, the Egg Fire. But that fire was particularly different. It came in like a freight train, went through our community, and we had hot spots and basically mopped up in a few days. People in the community weren't totally evacuated to the other part of the community that was safe, so it was a totally different fire. But anyway, I sat in, I was actually appointed the animal welfare coordinator, as Thomas mentioned, but I just want to comment that, it got me at the table, and I just want to thank, I got a chance to see the committee working, and they did a tremendous job. And it was actually the committee that recommended that we need to take care of the animals, and I stepped up and volunteered. And I find that it was something that was, I know I heard from the provincial fire commissioner, he says, I've been to a number of disasters and I've never ever seen animals taken care of as part of the operation. And as Sandra mentioned, it was really appreciated. And, there's certainly things that we learned from that. And we're reviewing how that procedure went by, and we'll certainly be more prepared the next time. But it was, when we talk about evacuation and those kind of things, and, when you're in the control center, you're getting some of your orders from the wildfire branch, you're getting the RCMP involved, and there's really, when you're talking about evacuating people, you have to, the RCMP, they've got to provide that security in your community. And there's a lot of people say, well, I wanted to be there. But if you have too many people in the community, it's very difficult for them to maintain that security that people expect. And so, and also for the fire department, they don't need a bunch of people in the way of their operation. So if you do allow people to stay in your community, they have to really stay out of the way. And it would have been very difficult, I know, to keep a lot more people in, having experienced the time that was in there. So as we move forward, I think, there's a lot of things to consider, both for and against more people staying.
My name's Joni Mack. I'm the administrator for the Village of Jansen, but I don't have a question in that capacity. I am a cabin owner on Namibin, and kind of chuckled when you said that little thing about feeding your dog. I have a 2x4 for a door, and that's my kid's growth chart. The fire came within 100 feet of our cabin, and it's because of those efforts and stuff that we still have the cabins, and I still have that piece of wood. I guess my question, and so I have a lot of appreciation, but I also have guilt, because there was a lot of resources that was spent on saving our stuff when there's a whole community who is being affected by this. So what can we as cabin owners, and what can the province do to help our cabin owners? What can we do to prevent something like this, so that that amount of resources doesn't need to be saved or spent just to save a 2x4?
Well, I think your 2x4 is important, because I think every aspect of everyone that lost things or was threatened is important. I think as a region, we've realized that cabin owners, there needs to be the ability to supply the sprinkler units. There needs to be a plan in place for those individuals, so that they're not reliant on the system, but self-reliant. The members of Watton Bay did a tremendous job protecting their community. For 2 weeks, they set up their own sprinkler systems, and that's what saved that community. They lost 3 homes, however the rest it was. So there has to be an emphasis, I believe, from all levels of government to allow residents in areas where they're underserviced to provide the services for themselves, including sprinklers and things like that. And I don't think you should feel guilty, because I think a win for anybody to save a property is a win, and we're glad that you're going to keep coming back to our region.
Well, Thomas said it all. I think we realized pretty well that during and after, a lot of the communities around the area, and a lot of the cabins on the lake that were threatened, and Namibin as well, and other communities, that the sprinkler systems were a very efficient way of preventing your property from burning. And seriously, if you have a cottage on Ronge or Namibin, it would be just fantastic if each owner would have his own sprinkler system. I think that there could be some coordination with fire management or with environment as to have sort of a consistent type of pump that you could plug into a system So maybe everyone wouldn't need a pump, but there would be some in the area available, so you can move them where you need them and hook them into a set-up sprinkler system. Or if you can do your own sprinkler system, that's fantastic. It's an awful feeling to lose your cabin, let me tell you. And, when you know you're stretched too thin to be there to man the pumps or to even set up a system.
Okay, we'll make this the last question. Go ahead.
And it's not a question, it's a comment.
Very
My
well.
name is Louise Tereschik. I'm with Council Candle Lake, Resort Village of Candle Lake. To give some clarity on certain things, Wadden Bay was saved because that was a fire-smart community. And I just took training, and I'm now considered a local fire-smart representative. And it's a federal initiative to teach people that there are some things that you can do to save your property. And it's not a lengthy program, but it's each community works together, trimming trees, putting up sprinkler systems, doing whatever it is they feel is necessary, but there is training out there for you to save your property. So yes, you can do something to help yourself.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to ask you guys to join me in thanking all three presenters today. Excellent information.